Deborah Williams was gazing out the office window, making final preparations for her business trip starting tomorrow. Boston's autumn twilight came early, and the setting sun between the skyscrapers cast long shadows across her desk. For the past 7 years since her divorce, Deborah had succeeded as a marketing director at a major pharmaceutical company while raising her daughter Emma alone. "Deborah, I've finished the final version of tomorrow's presentation materials," her assistant Jennifer said, handing her the documents. Deborah gave a grateful smile as she looked them over. "Thank you, Jennifer. It's perfect." She closed the file and glanced at her watch. "Is it 6:30 already? I need to pick up Emma." Deborah hurriedly grabbed her bag and slipped on her coat. Her mind was constantly filled with work deadlines and her daughter's school event schedules, but no matter how busy she was, she had always avoided sacrificing time with her daughter. When she arrived at the elementary school with the after-school program, Emma was already waiting at the entrance. The little girl with black hair tied in 2 ponytails immediately jumped up when she spotted her mother. "Mom. Today, we made volcanoes in science class." Deborah embraced her daughter and kissed her cheek. "That's wonderful. Tell me all about it when we get home." In the car, Emma excitedly continued talking about everything that happened at school. While Deborah nodded along with her daughter's stories, she was thinking about her upcoming business trip. Normally, Emma could stay with friends or a babysitter, but unfortunately, this time the school's 3-day fall break coincided with her trip. While preparing dinner, Deborah made her decision. Her options were limited. She would have to ask her parents. "Emma, you'll be staying with Grandpa and Grandma while I'm away on my business trip. Is that okay?" Emma, who was eating pasta at the dinner table, paused her fork and looked up at her mother. She liked Grandpa Harold. He was kind and always told interesting stories. But Grandma Judith was a bit scary. At Grandma's house. Emma's voice was tinged with anxiety. Deborah understood her daughter's feelings. Her own relationship with her mother was complicated. Judith's approach to raising the young Deborah had been excessively strict. If her room was messy, no dinner; if her grades dropped, no going out; if she made excuses, it was considered talking back and she was punished. Her father Harold was gentle and understanding, but he always deferred to his wife's decisions and never protected his daughter. When Deborah got married and left home, she felt as if she'd been released from prison. Even after her divorce, she had kept her distance from her parents' house, determined not to let Emma experience what she had. However, Judith seemed to have changed in recent years. Each time she met her granddaughter, she showed a softer expression than before. "It's all right, Emma. Grandma's gotten nicer lately, hasn't she? And it's only for 3 days," Deborah tried to reassure her daughter. Emma nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll be fine. But promise you'll call every day." "Of course. We'll do video calls too," Deborah promised. After dinner, Deborah called her parents. Her mother answered the phone. "Deborah? This is unusual." Judith's voice wasn't as cold as it used to be. "Mom, I have a favor to ask. I have a sudden business trip next week. Could you look after Emma for 3 days?" There was a moment of silence on the other end of the phone. "Of course. I'd love to take care of my granddaughter." Deborah couldn't believe it. The mother she once knew would have lectured her about putting work before family. "Really? Thank you, that's a big help. Emma is such a sweet child. We've gotten softer in our old age," Judith laughed. "Besides, time with grandchildren is special." After the call ended, Deborah felt mixed emotions. Had her mother really changed? Or was she simply tired with age? Either way, it was a change to be grateful for. The day before her trip, Deborah and Emma headed to her parents' house. The 2-story brick house remained unchanged in Deborah's memory, exuding dignity and strictness. The front door opened, and Judith and Harold came out to greet them. "Emma, how you've grown." Judith embraced her granddaughter. Emma seemed a bit tense but returned a smile. Harold said to Deborah, "Don't worry. We'll take good care of her." At the entrance, Deborah was hugged tightly by her daughter. "I'll be all right, Mom," Emma smiled bravely. Tell me all about your trip when you get back. Deborah stroked her daughter's head and promised, I'll call every night. She thanked her parents and got into her car. Watching Emma's small figure in the rearview mirror, she tried to shake off her anxiety. During her trip, Deborah video called with Emma every night. The first 2 days went without any problems. Emma happily talked about playing in the garden with Grandpa and how Grandma had baked special cookies for her. However, on the morning of the final day, it was Harold who answered the call. Good morning, Deborah. Emma? Oh, she's gone shopping with your mother. Shopping? Deborah looked at her watch. It was 8 in the morning. This early? Well, something about an early morning sale. Harold's voice sounded slightly tense. I'll have them call you back when they return. After ending the call, Deborah felt something was off. Her mother liked shopping, but going out first thing in the morning with her granddaughter seemed a bit strange. However, she pushed the thought aside and prepared for her final meeting. Fortunately, all her business negotiations finished earlier than scheduled, and she was able to return home several hours ahead of plan. Deborah drove directly from the airport to her parents' house. Normally she would have gone straight home to recover from the trip, but her desire to see her daughter won out. On the way, she called Harold's cell phone several times to speak with Emma, but there was no answer. They must be out, she told herself, though something nagged at the back of her mind. When Deborah arrived at her parents' house, she unlocked the front door and went inside. The sound of a television came from the living room. I'm back. Emma, she called out as she entered the living room. There sat her mother Judith alone on the sofa, watching TV. Oh, Deborah. You're back already? I thought you were coming tomorrow evening. Judith turned down the volume with the remote and looked up at Deborah. Her expression showed mild surprise, but there was something unnatural about it. The meetings ended early. Where's Emma? Emma? Judith tilted her head and laughed lightly. She must be playing somewhere, I suppose. Deborah frowned. Where's Dad? He went shopping. He should be back soon. Deborah left the living room and began searching the house. The guest room where Emma had been sleeping, the backyard, the kitchen, but her daughter was nowhere to be found. When she returned to the living room, her heart was pounding with anxiety. Mom, where is Emma? Tell me the truth. Judith slowly turned off the television and turned to face Deborah. The smile from earlier was gone, replaced by something cold in her face. That child has been crying non-stop. I want mommy, I want mommy. So annoying. Deborah felt the blood drain from her face. What are you saying? Where is Emma? Judith stood up and began pouring tea. Her movements were calm, but there was something unsettling in her tone of voice. You were the same as a child. Noisy, disobedient. Mom. Deborah's voice trembled. Tell me where Emma is, right now. Judith held her cup and took a slow sip. Her eyes were on Deborah, but she seemed to be looking into the distance. That child needed discipline. Because you didn't raise her properly. Deborah confronted her mother. What do you mean? What did you do? I didn't do anything. Just. Judith's lips formed a thin smile. She was so noisy, I locked her in the basement. All the blood drained from Deborah's body. Memories from her childhood flooded back. The dark, damp basement. The terrifying hours locked inside whenever Judith decided she had done something wrong. Deborah had suppressed these memories for years, but now they all came rushing back vividly. You put Emma in the basement? Deborah's voice was shaking. Since when? Since yesterday afternoon, I think, Judith shrugged. I was planning to let her out before you got back, but you came home early. For a moment, Deborah couldn't believe this was really happening. Her own mother had locked her daughter in the basement? For over 24 hours? Have you lost your mind? Deborah cried. Emma is only 7 years old. Why would you? Before finishing her sentence, Deborah turned on her heel and ran toward the basement stairs. She could hear her mother's laughter behind her, but it didn't register. When she stood before the old wooden door leading to the basement, Deborah's feet froze. From under the door, a red liquid was slowly seeping out. "Emma," she shouted, but there was no answer. Though her entire body was trembling with fear, Deborah placed her shaking hand on the doorknob. She didn't want to imagine it, but the worst scenario crossed her mind. What that red liquid might be was too terrifying to consider. "Emma, are you okay?" "It's Mom." She turned the doorknob, but it was locked. Deborah began desperately pounding on the door. "Emma. Answer me." A weak voice was heard. "Mom." Hearing that small voice, a glimmer of hope lit up in Deborah's chest. "Emma. Stay away from the door. Mom's going to open it." Deborah looked around and found an old emergency key hanging on the hallway wall. With trembling hands, she took the key and inserted it into the lock. With a click, the lock opened, and Deborah pushed the door. From the dark basement came the damp air along with a strong smell of red wine. In the dim light, Deborah saw a fallen wine rack and broken bottles scattered on the floor. And there, sitting huddled among them, was Emma. Her daughter, wearing clothes soaked with red wine, was trembling from cold and fear. Deborah cried out as she rushed to her daughter and held her tightly. "Emma. Are you okay? Are you hurt?" Emma clung to her mother's chest and began to cry. "Mom. I was scared, it was so dark." Deborah took out her cell phone from her pocket and immediately called the police. "I need help. My mother locked my daughter in the basement and abused her." Her voice trembled with anger and fear. While explaining the situation to the police, Deborah picked up Emma and carried her out of the basement. Her daughter's body was cold, and her clothes were wet with red wine, but fortunately, there didn't seem to be any serious injuries. However, Emma's face was still marked with fear. "Grandma got angry," Emma said through tears. "I didn't do anything wrong." "It's okay, now," Deborah said, stroking her daughter's hair. "Mom's here. I won't let anything like this happen to you ever again." Deborah carried her daughter as she hurried out of the basement. Fortunately, Emma had no noticeable external injuries, but she was trembling from the cold and fear. "Let's go to the car," Deborah said quietly. "I have a warm blanket there." She placed Emma in the back seat of the car and took out a blanket from the trunk to wrap around her daughter. "Stay here. Mom will be right back, until the police arrive." Emma grabbed her mother's sleeve with trembling lips. "Don't go. It's all right, I'll be right back." "I promise," Deborah kissed her daughter's cold cheek. "Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone. When you hear the police sirens, wait until I knock on the window." Emma, looking anxious, slowly nodded. Deborah closed the car door, made sure Emma locked it from inside, and then returned to the house. In the living room, Judith was sitting quietly. Her expression no longer held the eerie smile from before, only a cold indifference remained. "You called the police?" Judith's voice was surprisingly calm. "Isn't that a bit dramatic?" Deborah felt her body shaking with anger. "You locked my daughter in the basement. For over 24 hours. It was part of discipline," Judith shrugged. "Are you planning to bring outsiders into our family matters?" "I don't understand what you're thinking," Deborah said with a trembling voice. "This is abuse. Clear child abuse." Judith stood up and approached Deborah. In her eyes was the cruel light that Deborah had feared since childhood. "That child should have been more mine than yours." Those words made Deborah shudder. "What are you talking about?" Before she could answer, Judith's eyes turned toward the window. The sound of police sirens was approaching. "You don't understand what you've done," Judith said in a low voice. "We're family." A few minutes later, 2 police officers were at the front door. Deborah explained the situation and told them Emma was waiting in the car. "My daughter is safe but very frightened. My mother locked her in the basement for over 24 hours. A young female officer went to check on Emma, while the older male officer took Judith to another room for questioning. Deborah returned to the car and opened the back door. Emma was still curled up under the blanket. The police are talking with Grandma. Deborah sat beside her daughter and gently put an arm around her. Can you tell me what happened? Emma remained silent for a while but eventually began speaking in a small voice. Grandma was nice the first day. But yesterday, when I cried because I wanted to see you, she got really angry. Emma's eyes filled with tears. She said, "Noisy children must be punished," and took me to the basement. Deborah felt her chest tighten. Those were the same words she had heard many times as a child. She closed the door and locked it. It was so dark. I was so scared, Emma continued, trembling. I knocked on the door many times, but no one came. Then I fell and heard something break. Deborah gently stroked her daughter's hair as she listened. Emma's tearful account fueled her anger even more. Did I do something bad? Emma's question nearly broke Deborah's heart. No, absolutely not, Deborah said firmly. You did nothing wrong. Grandma is unwell. Nearby, the female police officer approached, taking notes as she walked toward them. Young lady, I think it would be good for you to see a doctor, as your mother suggested. You don't seem to have any serious injuries, but just to be safe. Deborah nodded. Thank you. I'll take her to the hospital right away. Just then, another car hurriedly parked in front of the house. Harold jumped out, looking pale with fear and distress. Deborah. Emma. Harold rushed over to them. What happened? I got a call from the police. Deborah looked at her father with cold eyes. Did you know, Dad? Did you know Mom locked Emma in the basement? Harold's expression crumbled. No, I was. He stumbled over his words. You didn't know? Or were you just looking the other way as usual? Deborah's voice contained years of anger and disappointment. Harold shook his head. Deborah, please listen. I was out shopping. When I came back, Judith said, Emma went to a friend's house. I thought it was strange, but... Emma looked at her grandfather and shrank back slightly. Deborah didn't miss this. Emma, did Grandpa do anything? Emma shook her head. Grandpa wasn't there. But Grandma said, don't tell Dad when he gets back, let's keep it a secret. Harold covered his face with both hands. Oh, what have I done? The male police officer came out of the house. Ms. Williams, I'm concerned about your mother's condition. She doesn't seem mentally stable. May I call a medical team? Deborah nodded. Please do. She turned back to Emma and hugged her tightly. It's okay, now. I won't let anything like this happen to you again. Harold approached and nervously said, Deborah, there's something I need to tell you. About Judith, this isn't the first time. Deborah stared at her father. Deep regret showed in his eyes. What do you mean? About Judith's condition, Harold's voice was heavy. We should talk with the police. There are many things you don't know. Holding her daughter, Deborah prepared herself to face the truth that was about to be revealed. The hospital waiting room was wrapped in silence. Deborah leaned against the wall with her eyes closed, exhausted as she waited for Emma's examination to finish. Emma had slight dehydration and some scrapes, but fortunately no serious injuries. She was now talking with the female police officer in another room. Harold appeared with 2 cups of coffee. He offered one to Deborah and sat down beside her. His face showed fatigue and deep regret. Thank you, Deborah accepted the coffee silently. After a moment of silence, Harold sighed. Do we have time to talk now? Deborah looked at her father. Inside her swirled anger, confusion, and above all, questions. Yes, Emma's exam will take a while longer. A police officer approached from the separate room. I'd like to speak with both of you. The 3 moved to a small consultation room in the hospital. As Deborah sat in a chair, the police officer opened his notebook. Harold, could you tell us about your wife's condition? Harold took a deep breath. His hands were trembling. Judith, my wife was diagnosed with bipolar disorder more than 20 years ago, he began quietly. At first, the treatment was working well. She took her medication regularly and received counseling. But Deborah's eyes widened in surprise. 20 years ago? When I was in middle school. Harold nodded. Yes. The symptoms were there before the diagnosis. But we just thought she was a strict mother. Then what? Anger seeped into Deborah's voice. Judith would sometimes take extreme actions. Harold lowered his eyes. Especially toward you. The police officer quietly intervened. Deborah, has your mother done things like this in the past? Deborah desperately searched her childhood memories. Something was beginning to surface at the edge of her consciousness. The basement, darkness, fear. I don't remember, she said in a low voice. But now, I'm starting to recall something. Harold's voice trembled. Judith would lock you in the basement many times, claiming it was discipline. The longest was 2 days. The blood drained from Deborah's face. What? That's... Suddenly, a flood of memories overwhelmed her. The terrifying hours in the dark basement. The despair of crying out with no one coming. The mixed feelings of relief and fear when she heard the door open. And Judith's cold voice asking, "Have you learned to be a good girl? Is that why I have claustrophobia?" Deborah asked with a trembling voice. Harold nodded sadly. I'm sorry, Deborah. I should have protected you sooner. Why didn't anyone tell me? Tears of anger welled in Deborah's eyes. Why wasn't I informed about something so important? Because Judith seemed to get better, Harold explained. The treatment was working, and there hadn't been any problems for years. Besides, you left home right after college and didn't keep much contact after that. Deborah bit her lip. Indeed, she had consciously distanced herself from her parents. Especially after getting married. But recently, she stopped taking her medication on her own, Harold continued. I should have noticed. Her behavior started changing. The police officer quietly asked, when did you notice the changes? About 2 months ago, Harold answered. Her mood swings became more severe, and sometimes she seemed confused. But when I pointed it out, she got angry and insisted, I'm perfectly normal. And you agreed to take care of your granddaughter? The police officer's voice held no accusation, but Harold shrunk with guilt. She was so happy about it. Said she wanted to spend time with her granddaughter. I wanted to believe her. Deborah stood up and moved to the window. Her heart was filled with anger and sadness. What will happen to Judith now? She quietly asked. She's undergoing a psychiatric evaluation, the police officer answered. Depending on the results, involuntary hospitalization might be necessary. We're also considering applying for a restraining order to protect your daughter. Deborah gazed out the hospital window. In the autumn twilight, the streetlights were gradually coming on. Dad, she said without turning around. Why didn't you tell me anything? All these years. Harold sighed. I was ashamed. I couldn't forgive my own weakness, for not being able to stop Judith. Seeing you leave home and build your own life, I thought I shouldn't dig up the past. Deborah shook her head. But now, that past has hurt my daughter. The examination room door opened, and Emma appeared with the female police officer. Deborah hurried to her daughter and embraced her. Are you okay? Emma nodded slightly. Fear still lingered in her eyes, but there was also a sense of relief. The doctor said I was brave, Emma said in a small voice. Deborah lightly kissed her daughter's cheek. That's right. You are a very brave girl. The doctor came in and explained Emma's condition. Physically, there are no major issues, but psychological care is needed. I recommend trauma counseling. Deborah nodded. Thank you. I'll arrange it right away. After the doctor left, Deborah looked at her father. We're going now. We'll stay at a hotel. Harold nodded sadly. I understand. But, can I see you again sometime? Deborah hesitated for a moment. I can't say anything right now. But, for Emma's sake, I hope we can repair our relationship someday. She took Emma's hand and left the hospital. On a snowy winter day in Boston, Deborah closed her work laptop and gazed out the window. A year had passed since the incident. Her apartment offered a panoramic view of the city from the 12th floor. Though smaller than her previous home, this apartment was filled with the hope of a new beginning. "Mom, look." Emma burst into the living room, holding up a picture she had brought home from school. Now 8 years old, her daughter's smile was brighter and more confident than before. "That's wonderful, Emma." Deborah took the picture and gazed at it. It was a colorful family portrait. 2 small figures were standing hand in hand. "Is this us?" Emma nodded proudly. "Yes." Counselor Jessica said to draw happy memories. Deborah hugged her daughter. The trauma counseling was gradually showing results. Emma still had nightmares sometimes, but not as frequently as before. She still feared dark places, but was slowly overcoming it. Deborah herself continued weekly therapy sessions. As childhood memories became clearer, she began to understand how her behavior patterns were connected to past trauma. It was a painful process, but a necessary journey. In terms of work, Deborah had made a major decision. The intense business trip schedule of the past was gone, and she increased remote work to prioritize time with her daughter. The company understood her situation and accommodated her flexibility. "Mom, we're making pizza today, right?" "You promised," Emma said as she walked toward the kitchen. "Of course. I keep my promises," Deborah smiled. Her smartphone rang, and her father's name appeared on the screen. Deborah sighed. Her relationship with Harold remained complicated. He called almost weekly, hoping to meet Emma. Though Deborah had initially refused, she was slowly opening her heart to her father's sincere attitude of repentance. "Hello, Dad." "Hi, Deborah," Harold's voice sounded older than before. "How are you?" "And Emma?" "We're both fine," Deborah answered. "Emma just got back from school." "That's good." After a moment of silence, Harold continued, "About Christmas, have you thought about it?" Deborah looked at the snowy scene outside the window. A few weeks ago, Harold had asked to see Deborah and Emma for Christmas. Judith was still receiving treatment at a facility, and there would be no visits with her. "I'm still thinking about it, Dad," Deborah answered quietly. "I haven't decided yet." "I understand. I don't want to rush you," Harold's voice mixed resignation with hope. "I just want to see you both." After ending the call, Deborah headed to the kitchen. Emma had already put on an apron and was arranging the ingredients. "Was that Grandpa?" Emma asked. Deborah nodded. "Yes. He wants to see us for Christmas." Emma paused and looked up at her mother. "That would be okay. Isn't Grandpa lonely?" Those words surprised and moved Deborah. The depth of her 8-year-old daughter's compassion warmed her heart. "Really? You want to see Grandpa?" Emma thought for a moment before nodding. "Yes. Grandpa isn't a bad person. He just didn't help." Hearing Emma use the exact words she had learned in counseling last year, Deborah couldn't help but smile. That night, after Emma went to bed, Deborah sat on the living room sofa, lost in thought. She picked up her smartphone and sent a message to her father. "Would you like to come for Christmas Eve dinner? Nothing fancy, but Emma wants to see you too." The moment she pressed send, Deborah felt she had taken a new step forward. Blood ties cannot be changed. But the nature of family is something they could choose for themselves. In that choice, she had to admit, lay the possibility of forgiveness and healing. Outside the window, snow continued to fall quietly. Tomorrow would be a new day. And Deborah believed that even with small steps forward, the future could change.